The first sign that something had already gone wrong was how calmly the bank teller said no. She didn't look alarmed. She didn't lower her voice. She simply glanced at her screen, then back at me and said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins, I can't release that amount without the other account holder's approval." For a moment, I honestly thought she was talking to someone behind me. Until that morning, my life had felt settled in the way you earn by surviving it. Not exciting, not indulgent, but steady. I was 69 years old, widowed for 5, living alone in the house my husband and I bought when our children were small. The roof had been replaced, the mortgage paid off, the garden trimmed back every spring whether I felt like it or not. I knew exactly what I had, and more importantly, I knew where it was. Or I thought I did. The cash I was trying to withdraw wasn't for anything reckless. $5,000, cash. I needed it because my furnace had stopped working 2 nights earlier, right as the temperature dropped. I'd slept in 2 sweaters and wool socks, telling myself it was temporary. The repairman came that morning, polite and efficient, and explained the problem in plain terms. Major part, special order, payment required before installation. I nodded without hesitation. I had the money. At least, I believed I did. When the teller told me she needed my daughter's approval, I felt something small but sharp move through me. Not fear, confusion, the kind that makes you replay a sentence because it doesn't fit the world you thought you were standing in. "There must be some mistake," I said. "This is my account." She turned the screen slightly, careful but firm. My name was there, and beneath it, in smaller letters, my daughter's, joint holder. "Since when?" I asked. She checked again. March. March. 8 months earlier. I thanked her. I don't know why. Habit, I suppose. Then I walked out without the money. The drive home felt strangely quiet, as if the road itself had decided to give me space. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. I kept thinking Elaine must have changed something without explaining it properly. That was the only explanation that made sense. Elaine was my daughter, my only daughter, organized, capable, the one who handled paperwork the way some people handle crossword puzzles, with satisfaction. It had been her idea to add her name to my account after my knee surgery the year before. "Just in case," she said, sitting at my kitchen table, stacking mail into neat piles. "If something happens and I need to help with bills or emergencies." It sounded reasonable, responsible, the kind of thing adult children suggest and parents accept without much thought. "You'll still be in control," she'd added. I believed her. At home, the house felt colder than before, though nothing had changed yet. I called the repair company and explained there would be a delay. They were polite, but they added a rescheduling fee. I agreed. It wasn't their fault. That night I made soup and ate it standing at the counter, too unsettled to sit. I wrapped myself in a cardigan and told myself not to jump to conclusions. Elaine would explain. She didn't answer when I called her that evening or the next morning. When she finally returned my call the following afternoon, her voice sounded distracted, as if she were doing something else while we spoke. "Oh, Mom, I meant to tell you, the bank suggested some safeguards." "Safeguards?" I asked. "Withdrawal limits," she said lightly. "It's for your protection." "Protection from what?" "Well," she said, "from scams, from making rash decisions." "I needed the money for the furnace." "I know," she replied quickly. "Next time, just tell me first." Tell her first. The word stayed with me long after we hung up. Over the next few weeks, small things began to change, though none of them announced themselves loudly enough to justify confrontation. Bank statements stopped arriving in the mail. "I switched everything to paperless," she said. "It's easier." My debit card declined once at the pharmacy. "Probably a fraud alert. They're very strict now." When I asked for online access to check balances myself, she laughed gently. "Mom, I already monitor everything. You don't need that stress." Each explanation sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they formed something else. I started hesitating over ordinary decisions, buying gifts, scheduling repairs, even filling the car with gas. Not because I didn't have money, but because I wasn't sure I could reach it without asking. That realization didn't arrive all at once. It settled gradually, like a draft you feel before you know where the window is open. I told myself I was being ungrateful. Elaine was helping. Elaine was protecting me. But help shouldn't make you smaller. In November, I sat at the kitchen table to pay my property taxes, the same way I always had. Coffee cooling beside me, radio murmuring in the background. When I wrote the check, I noticed the balance didn't look right. I checked again. The money wasn't there. I called Elaine.
"Oh," she said, "I moved some funds into a better account." "What kind of account?" I asked. "A managed account," she said. "Higher yield." "Can I access it?" There was a pause. "Well, no, not directly." The room felt very quiet after that. "So I can't pay my taxes," I said. "I'll take care of it," she replied. "Don't worry." But I did worry. Not about the taxes, about the fact that my own money had become something I needed permission to touch. That night I didn't sleep much. I listened to the house creak and settle, sounds I'd known for years now feeling unfamiliar. I told myself this was what aging looked like, that this was the natural shift everyone talked about. But something in me resisted that explanation. This didn't feel like aging. It felt like authority changing hands without a conversation. A few days later, without telling Elaine, I went back to the bank. I asked to speak to a manager, a woman about my age, silver hair pulled back neatly, reading glasses hanging from a chain. Her name was Carol. She reviewed my account slowly, carefully. "Mrs. Collins," she said, "your daughter isn't listed as an authorized signer." "I know," I said. "She's a joint holder." Carol nodded. "That gives her equal ownership." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means she can move funds, set limits, open and close accounts." "And me?" "You can as well," she said, "unless restrictions are placed." "Which they are," I said. "Yes," she replied gently, "by her." I felt something settle in my chest then, not panic, not anger, recognition. This hadn't happened by accident. This hadn't happened by accident. "Can I remove her name?" I asked. Carol hesitated. "Only with her consent," she said. There it was. I wasn't locked out of my money by the bank. I was locked out by my daughter. I drove home slowly, my thoughts no longer scattered but disturbingly clear. Trust had shifted into control. Help had turned into management. That night I opened drawers I hadn't touched in months, old folders, documents I'd signed without reading closely because Elaine had been standing there, pen in hand, saying, "It's just routine, Mom." At the bottom of one drawer I found the form, joint ownership, permanent, no safeguards, no expiration. I sat there a long time, the paper resting in my hands. I wasn't angry yet. I was something else. Alert. Because once you realize a line has been crossed, the important question is not why it happened, but what you will allow next. And I knew with a calm certainty that surprised me that whatever came after this would not be quiet anymore. I didn't confront Elaine immediately.
That surprised me even as it was happening. I had always believed that problems should be addressed while they were still small, while the words were still available and not buried under resentment. That this did not feel like a problem that could be solved with a single conversation. This felt structural. Something had been rearranged beneath my life while I was still living inside it. So instead of calling her back right away, I waited. I watched. I paid attention in a way I hadn't before. Not suspicious exactly, but alert. The way you become alert when you realize a door you assumed was unlocked might not be. The first thing I noticed was how often Elaine used the word we. We should keep more cash tied up right now. We don't need to spend on that. We already talked about this. We hadn't, not really. When I pointed that out once, gently, she smiled in that patient way people use when they believe they are being reasonable and you are not. You told me to handle things, she said. I told you to help, I replied. She waved it off. Same thing. It wasn't, and the fact that she couldn't or wouldn't see the difference stayed with me. The furnace was repaired 2 weeks later than planned. I spent those nights bundled in sweaters, sleeping with a heating pad at my feet, telling myself I'd lived through worse. I had. That wasn't the point. The point was that I hadn't chosen this delay. Elaine paid the repair bill directly. She told me afterward, not before. I took care of it, she said, as if that closed the subject. I thanked her. That habit was still strong in me. But something in my chest tightened all the same. A week later, I received a notice in the mail from the county treasurer. Property taxes overdue. Late fee applied. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it, then read the notice twice to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. That had never happened before, not once, not even during the years when money had been tighter and the children were still at home and every dollar had a job already assigned. I called Elaine. I thought you were paying the property taxes, I said. I am, she replied. I just hadn't gotten to it yet. They're late, I said. There's a fee. There was a pause, followed by a sigh that sounded more impatient than apologetic.
Mom, this is exactly why I took over, she said. You get anxious about these things. I closed my eyes. I'm not anxious, I said. I'm attentive. She didn't respond to that. That night, something shifted inside me. Not fear, not anger, helplessness. The kind that doesn't come from physical limitation, but from moral displacement, from realizing that decisions affecting your life are being made elsewhere by someone who believes they know better than you do. I lay awake listening to the house settle, the quiet pops and creaks sounding louder than usual. I thought about my husband, gone now 6 years, and how carefully we had divided responsibility, how even when he handled something, I always knew what it was, where it stood. We had never confused trust with absence. I began to understand that this was not really about money. Money was simply the mechanism. What had changed was authority. Elaine did not see herself as assisting me. She saw herself as managing me. And management, once it takes root, rarely feels the need to explain itself. A few days later, I asked Elaine for something small. I'd like copies of the bank statements, I said, just for my records. There was silence on the line. Why? She asked. Because they're my records. Another pause. I already review everything, she said. There's nothing you need to worry about. I'm not asking because I'm worried. I'm asking because I want them. Her voice tightened slightly. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder for whom? I wondered. I didn't push her that day. Instead, I called my son, Daniel. Daniel lived 3 states away. We spoke every Sunday evening, sometimes longer if neither of us was in a hurry.
He was thoughtful, careful, and inclined to see both sides of any situation, sometimes to a fault. When I told him what had happened at the bank, he was quiet for a long moment. "She probably means well," he said finally. "I'm sure she does, but meaning well doesn't give someone the right to decide when I can access my own money." Another pause. "Do you want me to talk to her?" "No," I said, "not yet. I needed to understand the full shape of this before I brought anyone else into it." The next escalation arrived without warning. I received a call from a credit card company asking me to confirm a charge. I told the representative I hadn't made any recent purchases. She apologized and explained that the card on file had been used for an online booking. "What card?" I asked. There was a brief silence. "The joint card ending in 4421. I didn't recognize the number. When I called Elaine, she didn't deny it. "Oh, that. I used it to book a hotel for a conference next month. I'll pay it back." "You didn't ask," I said. "It's our card," she replied. The word landed heavily. No, it wasn't. That was the moment I stopped waiting for this to resolve itself. I made an appointment with an elder law attorney. I didn't tell Elaine. The attorney's office was small and quiet, intentionally so. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and old books. The woman who met with me was in her late 50s, calm and direct. Her name was Susan. She listened without interrupting as I explained everything: the bank visit, the limits, the managed account, the credit card charge. When she finished, she folded her hands on the desk. "What your daughter has done isn't unusual, but that doesn't make it harmless." "I trusted her," I said. Susan nodded. "Trust is not consent to surrender." That sentence settled into me with unexpected force. She explained my options slowly, clearly, without alarm. Legally, Elaine had acted within her rights as a joint account holder. Undoing that would require Elaine's cooperation or a legal challenge that would likely damage our relationship beyond repair. I asked Susan what she would do if I were her. She paused. "I would ask myself one question. Do I want peace based on silence or dignity based on clarity?" I drove home thinking about that. Peace based on silence. I had chosen that kind of peace before, in my marriage, in my parenting, in moments where speaking up felt like it might create more trouble than it solved. It had always cost something. When I finally asked Elaine to come over, she arrived already irritated. "This feels unnecessary," she said, setting her purse down. "Everything is under control." "That's exactly the problem," I replied. She laughed, sharp and short. "You're being dramatic." I slid the bank document across the table. "Did you understand what this meant when you had me sign it?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "It meant I could help." "It meant you could control," I said. "Those are not the same." Her expression hardened. "I did this because you need help," she said. "You're not as sharp as you used to be." The words were calm, certain. That certainty hurt more than cruelty would have. "I am still capable," I said quietly. She shook her head. "Mom, you're 70. "And you are 45, I replied. "That does not make you my keeper." The silence between us felt heavy, unfamiliar. "I'm trying to protect you," she said finally. "From what?" I asked. "From mistakes," she said. "From being taken advantage of, from yourself." That was the moment the line became unmistakable. Love does not require erasure. "I want my accounts separated," I said, immediately. Her eyes widened. "You're overreacting." "I'm reclaiming," I said. "If you do this," she said, "you're telling me you don't trust me." I met her gaze. "I'm telling you that trust does not mean obedience." She didn't agree right away. What followed were weeks of strained conversations, partial cooperation, and quiet resistance. Forms she delayed signing, calls she didn't return, explanations that circled without resolving anything. During that time, I felt something else erode. Not just trust in my daughter, but trust in myself. How had I let this happen? How many decisions had I waved away because it was easier to let her handle them? How many times had I confused relief with safety? These were not gentle questions, but they were necessary ones. The bank required mediation, a neutral room, neutral language, neutral expressions that barely concealed the emotional weight underneath. Elaine cried during that meeting. She said she'd only wanted to help, that she was scared something would happen to me, that she didn't want to lose me. I believed her, and I still did not back down. Fear does not entitle someone to take control of another adult's life, even if that adult is their mother. It took 3 months. 3 months of paperwork, legal fees, and conversations that never quite found their footing. Eventually, the accounts were separated. My name stood alone again. The relief I expected didn't arrive all at once. Instead, there was a quiet sense of correctness, as if something that had been slightly crooked had finally been straightened. What we lost in the process was harder to define. Something between Elaine and me shifted permanently, not broken, altered, more careful, less automatic. We still spoke, we still loved each other, but love, once mixed with control, does not return easily to innocence. One evening, Daniel called. "She's angry," he said. "She thinks you're accusing her of something." "I'm not accusing, I'm asserting." "That may feel the same to her," he said. "I know, but that doesn't make it wrong." The winter stretched on. I paid my bills myself again, slowly, deliberately. I noticed how grounding that felt, how reassuring it was to know exactly what left my account and when. I reopened an account at a different bank, one Elaine had never visited. The teller asked if I wanted to add a secondary holder. "No," I said, "just me." She smiled and nodded, as if that made perfect sense. It did. The furnace ran steadily now. The house was warm again, but the deeper cold, the one that had settled into my sense of safety, took longer to thaw. I was no longer naive about how easily authority can shift when wrapped in concern, how quietly dignity can be taken when no one announces they are doing it. That knowledge stayed with me, and it changed how I move through the world. If stories like this resonate with you, you may want to stay with this channel. These stories are told for people who understand. By the time spring arrived, I no longer wondered whether I had done the right thing. The question had shifted. It was no longer why did this happen? It was what will I allow from here on? And for the first time in months, I knew the answer. The quiet that followed surprised me. Not immediately. At first, there was still paperwork, phone calls, waiting periods, confirmations that arrived in envelopes thin enough to feel insulting after everything they represented. But once those stopped coming, once there was nothing left to sign or dispute or correct, a kind of stillness settled over my days. It wasn't peaceful, not yet. It was simply quiet. For weeks after the accounts were separated, I moved through my routines with exaggerated care, as if the ground beneath me were still uncertain. I checked balances more often than I needed to. I saved receipts. I reread statements, not out of fear that something would disappear again, but because I needed to rebuild trust in my own footing. There is a difference between caution and anxiety. I was learning it again. Elaine didn't come by for a while. We spoke on the phone briefly and carefully, conversations that hovered on the surface of things: weather, work, her son's soccer games, my doctor's appointment. Nothing that risked opening what was still tender between us. I understood her distance even as I felt it. When you believe you are doing the right thing, being told to stop can feel like an accusation, even when it isn't meant as one. Elaine had lost something too, though she would never have named it that way. She had lost certainty, the certainty that she knew best, the certainty that love automatically granted authority, the certainty that fear justified control. Those are difficult beliefs to let go of, especially when they have been quietly rewarded for a long time. I did not rush her. I had learned, finally, the cost of rushing peace. The first real sign that things had shifted came in the mail one afternoon in early spring. A simple letter from the bank. No apology, no explanation, just confirmation. Account established. Primary holder, Margaret Collins. Only my name. I sat at the kitchen table with that letter in front of me for a long time, not because I was savoring it, but because I needed to let it register fully. I had not imagined any of this. I had not exaggerated it. Something real had happened, and something real had been corrected. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer where I kept important documents, not as a trophy, as an anchor. Elaine came over a week later. I heard her car in the driveway and felt my body tense before my mind caught up. That reaction surprised me. I had never been afraid of my daughter. I still wasn't, not in the way that word usually means, but I had learned that familiarity does not always equal safety, and that lesson lingers. She stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside, looking around the house as if she hadn't been there 100 times before, as if she were entering someone else's space. "I brought soup," she said, holding up the container. "Thank you," I replied, and meant it. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had once stacked my mail into neat piles and told me it would be easier if she handled things, the same table where I had later spread out those same papers and finally read what they said. She stirred her soup without eating it. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was something brittle underneath it. "I know," I replied. She looked up, surprised, as if she had expected resistance. "I really thought I was helping," she continued. "I kept thinking, what if something happens and I didn't do enough? What if you needed something and I wasn't there?" I watched her as she spoke, not as my daughter who had overstepped, not as a woman defending herself, but simply as a person afraid of loss. I could see now how easily fear had slid into control without her fully noticing when it happened. "I don't doubt that you were scared, but fear doesn't give us the right to take someone else's independence." She nodded slowly. "I see that now," she said. "I didn't then." That was as close as we came to an apology. It was enough. Trust did not snap back into place. It doesn't work that way. But something steadier began to form instead. Boundaries, clearly stated and carefully kept. They lack the warmth of blind trust, but they also lack their danger. Over time, I noticed changes in myself. I asked more questions even when it felt inconvenient. I read every document before I signed it, even when someone else was waiting. I took my time making decisions, not because I was afraid of making mistakes, but because I had learned that the process itself was part of dignity. I reopened an account at a different bank, one Elaine had never set foot in. When the teller asked if I wanted to add a secondary holder, just in case, I felt no hesitation at all. "No," I said, "just me." She smiled and nodded, as if that made perfect sense. It did. I began attending a small discussion group at the library, women my age mostly. We talked about books at first, but inevitably the conversations drifted toward life, aging, children, the strange way authority can shift when no one is paying attention. One afternoon, a woman across the table said, "My daughter keeps telling me I shouldn't drive anymore. I'm not sure if she's right or just worried." No one rushed to answer her. We had all learned the danger of that. Elaine and I found a rhythm again, slower and more deliberate. She still helped me when I asked, rides when my knee acted up, company at appointments, but she asked now before stepping in. Sometimes I could see her stop herself mid-sentence, recalibrating. That mattered. I did not become suspicious of help. I became discerning. There is a difference. I would be lying if I didn't mourn what we had lost, the easy trust, the assumption that love always knows best. But I no longer believe that kind of trust is the highest form. True trust survives transparency, and dignity survives boundaries. I am 69 years old. I still live in the same house. I still pay my bills myself. I still make mistakes sometimes, and I correct them. That is not failure. That is life. What this experience taught me more than anything is how quietly a life can be rearranged when everyone believes they are being kind. No shouting, no cruelty, just small decisions made without you until one day you realize your own name no longer opens the doors it used to. If stories like this resonate with you, you may want to stay with this channel. These stories are told for people who understand. The truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. That is the irreversible thing. And once you know it, the only real choice left is whether you will live smaller to preserve comfort or stand fully in yourself and accept the cost of clarity. I chose clarity, not because it was easy, but because it was mine.